photograph is the delicate balance of shutter speed, aperture, and ISO. These are the camera settings that come together to emphasize an aesthetic, create a style, to make the image. If one variable changes, at least one of the others must also change to maintain the correct exposure. In order to balance these camera settings, you must prioritize the exposure triangle in a way that best presents your subject. To lock in your understanding, I'm going to show you each individual camera setting and the way that it affects an image. First up, shutter speed. Shutter speed is the amount of time that the shutter is open, controlling how much time your sensor is exposed to light. Every time you click a photo, the shutter opens and closes like a door, letting light hit the sensor, making the image visible. Shutter speed is measured in fractions of a second. We have a subject here in a very windy environment. His hair is going everywhere. To freeze this motion, we need to use a very high or fast shutter speed. If you want to emphasize motion blur over here, we'll want to do the opposite. A low or slow shutter speed will give us the opposite effect. So, the higher or faster the shutter speed, the more likely you'll be able to freeze action. The lower or slower the shutter speed, the more likely you'll be able to blur the motion. Next up, aperture. Aperture is the size of the hole that lets light into the camera. The bigger the hole, the more light that hits the sensor. The smaller, less light hits the sensor. Here we have a nice portrait set up for the subject. By changing the aperture, we're able to specify how much of the subject stays in focus. Shooting at a large aperture, like f2.8, the smaller the number, the larger the hole, creates a very narrow area of focus. Stopping the aperture down to, say, f20, the larger the number, the smaller the hole, gives us a greater depth of field, with more of the subject and background in focus. The larger the f-stop, the more shallow the depth of field. The smaller the aperture, the more overall focus in the image. Third, ISO. ISO is the chosen light sensitivity of your camera sensor. The higher the ISO number, the more sensitive your camera sensor is to light, making the image brighter. The lower your ISO number, the less sensitive the camera sensor is to light, making the image darker. We have the same subject in a room with ample light. Shooting at a lower sensitivity, like ISO 200, should be good here. Highlights and shadow details are clean and with virtually no grain or noise. But when the lights go down, we'll need to raise the sensitivity to expose the image. Employing a higher ISO allows us to make photographs in a dark, challenging scene. But it also introduces noise or graininess in the image, particularly in the shadow areas. So choose lower ISOs in brighter or well-lit settings and choose higher ISOs in dark or poorly lit situations. So there is a quiz to test your understanding of the exposure triangle. There are 6 questions based purely on the content we covered today, and after each question you will have time to think of your answer, and then the correct answer will then be displayed on the screen. This quiz is just purely based for your understanding and your comprehension of the lesson, and good luck. The amount of light or darkness of a photograph is known as the Is it A, exposure, B, shutter speed, C, contrast, or D, light? The correct answer was A, exposure. What is the aperture measured in? Is it A, seconds, B, spots, C, f-stops, or D, fractions? The correct answer was C, f-stops. Which is the largest aperture size? Is it A, 1600, is it B, 2.4, C, 1.8, or D, 1/300? The correct answer was B, 1.8. What do you do to the aperture to let in more light? Is it A, make the f-stop number larger, or B, make the f-stop number smaller? The correct answer was B, to make the f-stop number smaller. How should you change the shutter speed to let in less light? Is it A, make the shutter speed faster, or is it B, make the shutter speed slower? The correct answer was A, make the shutter speed faster by making the fraction number larger. And the last question is, in an overlit setting like being outside in the sun, how should you adjust each variable? For the aperture, we would decrease the size of the aperture, we would make the shutter open and close faster, and for the ISO, we would decrease the ISO by lowering its number. So that's it for the second lesson of the course. I know that these settings can't be directly changed using an iPhone and are mainly used using cameras, but the exposure triangle is the fundamentals of photography. And I hope you enjoyed the lesson, and to put your learning to test, go ahead and visit this link up above. And when you click on the link, scroll down to see a play button, which will lead you to an exposure simulator where you can apply what you've learned today to different photography situations. I'll see you soon in the next lesson. Have a great day.